Ethiopia's constitution provides for an ethnic-based federal system of government. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's Prosperity Party dominated the 2021 general election, winning more than 96% of the 468 seats up for election in the House of People's Representatives, and formed a government. Voting for the 79 remaining seats representing other constituencies, including the entire Tigray region, remained postponed indefinitely. The elections took place against a backdrop of instability, including interethnic and intercommunal violence, and an electoral process that was not free or fair for all citizens, although observers assessed the result generally reflected the will of most citizens. National and regional police forces are responsible for law enforcement and maintenance of order, with the Ethiopian National Defense Force sometimes providing internal security support. The Ethiopian Federal Police report to the Prime Minister's office. The Ethiopian National Defense Force reports to the Ministry of Defense. The regional governments control regional security forces, which generally operate independently from the federal government and in some cases operate as regional defense forces maintaining national borders. Civilian authorities maintained effective control over the security forces. There were reports that members of the security forces committed numerous serious abuses. On August 24, fighting between the Ethiopian government and Tigray People's Liberation Front regional forces resumed after 5 months of a humanitarian truce declared on March 24 by the government and reciprocated by the Tigray People's Liberation Front. On November 2, the government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front signed a cessation of hostilities agreement. By year's end, humanitarian access to Tigray region had significantly increased. In addition, a monitoring, verification, and compliance mechanism under the auspices of the African Union had begun preliminary work in accordance with the terms of the cessation of hostilities agreement. The government did not allow the UN International Commission of Human Rights experts on Ethiopia access to areas outside Addis Ababa to investigate human rights violations and abuses committed in the conflict. Instead, the government signaled openness to joint monitoring by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. Meanwhile, political and ethnic tensions continued to lead to violence in other regions, notably Benishangul Gumuz, Oromia, and southern nations, nationalities, and peoples region, as well as credible reports of abuses of human rights. Throughout the year, significant human rights issues included credible reports of unlawful or arbitrary killings, including extrajudicial killings by the government, enforced disappearance by the government, torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment by the government, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, arbitrary arrest and detention, political prisoners or detainees, serious abuses in a conflict, including unlawful or widespread civilian harm, unlawful recruitment or use of child soldiers by government forces and militia groups, serious restrictions on freedom of expression, including violence or threats of violence against journalists, unjustified arrests of journalists, censorship, and the existence of criminal libel and slander laws, serious restrictions on internet freedom, interference with the freedom of peaceful assembly, government corruption, lack of investigation of and accountability for gender-based violence including rape and conflict-related sexual violence, trafficking in persons, crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting members of racial or ethnic minority groups, and existence or use of laws criminalizing same-sex sexual conduct. The government took limited steps to prosecute officials who committed human rights abuses or were involved in corruption, resulting in impunity for most abuses. The government took some steps toward holding government security forces accountable for abuses. There were reports of killings of civilians, rape, and other forms of gender-based violence, forced displacement, and looting and destruction of property by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, Amhara regional militias, and other armed groups. These reports were widespread in the context of the conflict in the northern part of the country.